My sister-in-law doesn't want me to attend her housewarming party, even though they lived with me for 6 months. But I pulled out some papers, and in minutes, the party was over. Alright, I need to know if I messed up because my family is giving me a lot of heat for something I did, but honestly, I don't think I did anything that bad. A few days ago, I crashed my brother's housewarming party. Before you judge, hear me out, I had my reasons. I wasn't invited to the event, and I found that very insulting because I let my brother and his wife stay with me rent-free for 6 months 2 years ago. I'm 32 years old, my brother is 30, and my sister-in-law is 29. I'll call my brother Joe and my sister-in-law Emma. Joe and I used to be very close. He always came to me for everything. Similarly, I also had a very close relationship with him, and I love my brother. I still love him, that's for sure. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be considering apologizing for everything that happened. But honestly, I never liked Emma. It's not like I never tried to like her. I really put in a lot of effort to try to like her, but it was impossible. She's a bit too pretentious for my taste. I really don't like people like that, and she's the type of person who always looks down on others if their opinions don't completely align with hers. I find that very annoying because I think we're all different, and we should respect and celebrate that instead of belittling people who aren't exactly like us. Luckily for her and my brother, they are quite similar and have many common interests. But at least my brother doesn't think it's necessary to look down on others. For example, both of them went to business school, which is where they met. They started dating in college and got married at 24 after dating for nearly 5 years. By the time they got married, I already didn't like Emma. They'd been together for 5 years, and we'd met many times, whether at birthdays, family events, or holidays. But every time we met, she always said something very annoying, and that bothered me. Most of the time, I was the target of her comments, which made it even worse. The truth is, I live a very unconventional lifestyle, and I know many people may not like or approve of it, but that's fine. I don't need their approval to live the way I want and make the choices I choose. For some reason, she feels the need to comment on how I live my life every time we meet. To give you some context, I'm a voice actor. It's not a very conventional job, I'll admit, but it pays very, very well, and I also get a lot of offers and jobs, so I'm happy with my life so far. I've done audiobooks, commercials, and many other things. But Emma has it in her head that I don't have a very stable career and that if I lose my voice, it's all over for me. I don't know why she thinks that because I take very good care of my voice. I think that's part of the job, and it's my instrument. I think it's ridiculous that she says things like that about me in public, but she doesn't see anything wrong with how she comments on my career. There's also the fact that I'm older than her, so I definitely have a bit more experience than she does. She really doesn't know anything about the industry, but believes that, since she's the one who graduated from a really reputable business school, she has the right to comment on how I live my life. I didn't exactly go to college, to be honest. I wouldn't say I'm a dropout, but I went to community college. I wasn't really interested in it, and maybe I would have been a good student if I had studied, but I never bothered. I was more interested in other things like sports and theater and stuff like that. You get the idea. I wasn't particularly studious, and that showed in my grades, so I ended up going to community college. Even there, my attendance was a bit low, but somehow, I managed to get through it. As soon as I finished high school, I started working anyway, so I didn't really think college was important for me because I was already earning my own money by then. I interned at a company, but then I started auditioning for commercials, and someone on set really liked my voice, which helped me get my first job. Since then, I've been in the industry, and I'm pretty sure I know more about my career and the choices I'm making than she does, given that she knows nothing about my line of work. She thinks I should go back to college, get a real degree from a real university, and then move on with my life, so I at least have something to fall back on if something goes wrong with my voice. And I probably would have appreciated the advice if it hadn't come from her. She always makes sure to say these things when we're with family and surrounded by other people, and she always says them with a very condescending tone that just screams, "I'm better than you." Not only that, but there are also a couple of other things that people might find unconventional about my lifestyle. For instance, I've made it clear I'm never getting married, and even though my family has tried to make me consider that option, I've been very firm about it and have told everyone I'm not interested in marriage. I have nothing against people who get married, it's just not for me. But I have a daughter, and it wasn't an accident or the result of any previous relationship. I adopted her. She's 5 years old, and I adopted her 5 years ago when she was just a baby. I'm sure having a husband probably would have made things easier for me, but I don't want one. I don't need one. I'm quite happy with my life. I've had some relationships, but none have been serious. I've made it very clear to everyone I've dated that I'm not interested in marriage. Some stayed and some left, but my lifestyle isn't going to change for any of those things. And I don't think motherhood has anything to do with being married or not. I wanted to be a mom, and I felt ready to be one, which is why I adopted my daughter. because her biological mother couldn't take care of her after she was born. My family took some time to accept it, but eventually they came to terms with the fact that at this point, they just had to let me do what I wanted. There was no way to stop me because I wasn't going to listen to anyone's opinions or change my life based on what they thought I should do. Everyone had to accept it, except for Emma, who still thought it was okay to comment on my life and try to influence my decisions even after I adopted my daughter. For months, she kept telling me I needed to start looking for a husband because otherwise, my life would become very difficult. I found it very annoying, and I swear I would have said something if it weren't for my brother. The only reason I didn't say anything to her at any point was because of him. I love my brother and want him to be happy, so I kept quiet. I had discussed Emma's behavior with him before, even when they were dating, and he had told me that she was like that because she didn't think there was anything offensive about the things she said. In fact, she saw herself as a good Samaritan and believed she was doing good by giving people advice. Whenever I told him I was upset, I'd tell Joe that I was going to explode at some point, and he would keep begging me not to say anything because it would hurt her. Apparently, she was very sensitive and delicate about these things, and he didn't want any drama, and when I say he begged me, that's exactly what he did. He would literally start crying, and I can't stand that. I'm not the type of person who likes hearing people cry, and I definitely don't like being the reason they cry. So he would emotionally manipulate me into staying quiet, and I just had to let Emma get away with all the nonsense she said. This went on for years until a couple of months ago, when they suddenly stopped talking to me without any apparent reason. I later found out the real reason they stopped talking to me, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let me tell you about how I let them live with me when their business failed 2 years ago. Both of them quit their jobs about 2 years ago to start a business of their own. I didn't think it was a good idea because they had only been working for a few years and definitely didn't have enough savings. So I tried to warn Joe about it, but he told me they were the business experts here, so they knew what they were doing. They were aware they didn't have enough savings, but they were quite confident they could make the money back in no time. They dismissed my advice because he and his wife were too full of themselves. And I was fine with that since, in the end, it was their life, and I just wanted to give some advice. But of course, what I had warned them about was exactly what ended up happening. They started an event management business, but they barely had any connections or even capital. And everyone knows that in an industry like that, you need connections to survive, or you'll run out of money quickly. They didn't listen to my very practical advice and believed they knew everything they needed to know, so they went ahead and ran their business into the ground within the first few months. When they realized it wasn't going to work for them, they showed up at my door, begging me to help them and let them live with me because they couldn't afford their rent. And with the way the business was going, it was very unlikely they'd recover the money they'd invested in it anytime soon. They also had to pay back the money they had borrowed from friends to set up the business because, clearly, it wasn't going to work out. It was a very sad phase. They had to shut everything down and make a lot of sacrifices. I wanted to be there for my brother, so I told them they could live with me because I knew they couldn't afford their rent. At the time, they were very grateful, and Emma behaved impeccably during the 6 months she lived with me. She knew I was doing her a favor despite how she had treated me in the past, so she didn't make any unpleasant comments for the next 6 months. Around the 4-month mark, Joe asked me to talk to a friend of mine and get him a job at a decent place because he was tired of working at the same company as before. He had to go back to his old job when he realized the business wouldn't work, and Emma had to do the same. At least she was happy while working, so she didn't complain. But Joe didn't like the company he was working for, so he asked me to make some calls and get him something better, since he knew I was in contact with many executives. So, I decided to do it for him. I spoke to a friend of mine who had his own fashion brand and asked him to hire my brother since they were already looking for someone to manage their accounting department. He did, for which I was grateful because my brother didn't even have the required years of experience for the job, but my friend did it as a favor to me. Within 2 months, they had moved out of my house and were back on their feet. Joe promised me he'd never forget what I had done for him because this was important. But apparently, that wasn't real because he seemed to forget what I did for him not long after. At least my brother took a year to forget, but Emma practically forgot the moment they moved out of my house. She went back to making weird comments about me and acting condescending around me because now she didn't need me anymore, as her husband was working at a good place and earning plenty of money. So there was no longer any need for Emma to behave kindly toward me, and she stopped doing so. I should have known what kind of snake she truly was and never helped my brother in the first place, but I couldn't do that to him. I could have easily shattered their illusion that they had suddenly become important just because my brother was working in a good position by telling her that I was the one who got him the job, or else he'd still be relying on me. But I didn't, because I didn't want to hurt Joe, and honestly I'm too old for this kind of childish drama. She went back to saying weird things about me, and I went back to trying to ignore her, She was so ungrateful that I wanted to slap her across the face or at least tell her what I thought of her. But every time I seemed upset, Joe would come to my side and try to calm me down. It was very difficult for me to be in that position, and I don't know how I stayed calm for so long. But then, almost a year ago, I had a verbal argument with Emma. We were at my mom's house celebrating her birthday, and, like at every other family event, I brought my daughter with me. She was playing, walking around the room, and then approached Emma. Emma started playing with her, and I was okay with it up until that point. But then, for no real reason, she started telling my daughter to ask me to find a dad for her because she would need one as she grew up. My daughter just looked very confused and didn't know what to say, and I got so angry because it's one thing for her to say weird things like that to me. I'm an adult, and the only reason I don't say anything back is because I don't want to get involved in her pettiness. But she can't say things like that to my daughter because that's just stupid and ridiculous. So I got really angry, and before Joe could calm me down, I went up to her and told her to shut up and not speak like that to my daughter. I was already fed up with her saying weird things like that to me, and I wasn't going to let her drag my daughter into it. I definitely raised my voice, and I don't care. She deserved it, and I had put up with enough of this nonsense for years. I think what I did was necessary because after that, she stopped talking to me completely. And honestly, it was a very welcome change. She didn't greet me or even talk to me unless the situation absolutely required it. If there was any way to avoid interacting with me, she took it, and in that sense, I was fine with it. Although Joe was very upset that we were no longer speaking, he tried to tell me to reconcile with Emma, but I wasn't going to do that. She had offended and disrespected me far too many times for me to even consider it. So I told him that wasn't going to happen, and he was upset for a while. But I was fine with it. She was the ungrateful one here. I had let them live in my house for 6 months when they were struggling, yet she didn't have the decency to be respectful and mindful of that, so she could continue not talking to me if that's what she wanted. It only showed me what kind of person she truly was. The only person who really cared whether we had a relationship or not was Joe, and I had told him I had let many things slide for his sake, but that day she had no right to involve my daughter in this. I continued talking to my brother because I had nothing against him, and he had nothing against me either. But then, a few days ago, my mom called me to ask what I was bringing to my brother's housewarming party. I had no idea what she was talking about because I hadn't received any invitation to such a party. Then she told me that Joe and Emma had bought a new house just a week ago, and that was the day they had also sent out the invitations. Apparently, they must have told everyone not to tell me, but my mom hadn't received the memo and ended up talking to me about it because she had no idea what was going on. I felt very offended that I hadn't been invited because, just to refresh your memory and not to sound repetitive, I literally had to let these people live in my house under my roof and use all my facilities for free for 6 months 2 years ago, all because the little money they had was being used to pay off debts. So the least they could have done was invite me to their housewarming party. I even helped my brother get the job he has now, which is how he was able to buy that house with the money from the job I got for him. I thought this was very disrespectful and immediately called my brother to talk to him about it. When I called and confronted him, he didn't even hesitate to tell me that I hadn't been invited on purpose because Emma had apparently banned me from their new house. She didn't get along with me and didn't want me attending any of her special events, including the housewarming party. Not only that, but I would never be invited to any of their events in the future unless I chose to apologize. I couldn't even imagine how he could tell me all this without the slightest hint of remorse in his voice. He didn't even sound guilty about it and told me very casually, as if it were perfectly normal and I should be fine with it. I didn't even bother dignifying what he said with a response. I had made it very clear that I wasn't going to apologize to his wife, no matter what. She was the one who had disrespected me, not just once, but every chance she got. I had always let it slide because I didn't want to hurt my brother or cause drama between us. But this was going too far. I was really offended and hurt, so I thought about it for a week, and on the day of the party, I decided to crash their housewarming and get my revenge this time. It was petty and really wrong of me, but I thought it was necessary at the time because they were turning people against me. Otherwise, no one in my family would have kept such a big secret from me unless they had been explicitly told not to tell me. And for that, they obviously had to paint me as the villain because I was quite well regarded by my relatives, and they had manipulated them against me. I showed up at their new house after getting the address from my mom and made sure to arrive when I knew all the guests would be present. Everyone was quite surprised to see me because they knew I hadn't been invited, and that only confirmed my suspicions that they had been making people believe I was the bad guy here. But I came prepared with evidence of their ingratitude toward me. I had printed out the emails exchanged between my friend and me, which was how I had secured my brother the job he has now. Despite keeping this secret for so long, they hadn't made an effort to teach his wife not to disrespect me. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, that's common sense. Once there, I drew attention to myself and began telling everyone how they had lived with me for 6 months when their business failed, and how I had even gotten my brother a better job than the one he had before so he could earn more and have better hours. Despite this, Emma had continued to disrespect me and be condescending toward me. But I had stayed quiet because I didn't want to hurt my brother or cause a rift between us, thinking that was equally important to him. But since that wasn't the case, I didn't feel the need to keep their secrets anymore. So I revealed everything I knew and everyone was shocked. Emma seemed the most upset of all. She immediately turned to Joe and asked if what I was saying was true, even though there was no need for that because I already had the email printouts to prove it. But when Joe confirmed that it had indeed happened, Emma became very upset and started crying. She told everyone the party was over and then ran upstairs, with Joe following her. After that, there was nothing left for me to do, so I left as well, and no one responded to me after that. The next morning, my mom called me and said what I did at the party was completely unacceptable, and that I needed to apologize to the family because my behavior was nothing short of cruel. Even Joe messaged me, saying he never wanted to speak to me again because of what I had done. Emma was now very upset about what had happened the night before, and I had ruined the first day of their new life. I feel like I'm being vilified for standing up for myself, but at the same time, I don't know if crashing their party was the right decision, now that I'm facing so much backlash. I thought I'd ask the people of Reddit what they thought about this. Am I the bad guy for crashing my brother and sister-in-law's housewarming party to humiliate them? I don't think so, but everyone in my family does. That's why I don't want to get stuck in my own thoughts and assume everything I do is right while everyone else is wrong. I need impartial opinions. Update 1. Hi, it's been 2 weeks, and no one in my family has spoken to me. My parents aren't talking to me anymore, nor is my brother, and everyone else has started ignoring me as well. But at least you guys don't think I was wrong for doing what I did, and that means a lot because I know you're speaking from an objective point of view and not biased like my family. I can't believe I've done so much for so many people in this family, and this is what I get in return. I guess that explains a lot about my brother's behavior. No wonder he's like this. Given the people around him, no one is grateful for the things I've done for them, and they're trying to paint me as the villain just because I wasn't willing to tolerate disrespect anymore. Well played, I must say. That Emma is milking everyone's sympathy and taking full advantage of it for sure. I'm glad I decided not to apologize and cut ties with them completely. I'm better off without them, and so is my daughter. I think I put up with too much for my brother, with whom I always had a good relationship, but he's fallen under Emma's spell, and now I see where his loyalty lies in all this. I'm glad I lashed out and that he's not talking to me anymore. It just proves even more clearly the kind of person my brother is, and it helped me distance myself from him. Update 2. So, it's been nearly a month without contact with my family. My daughter keeps asking me when she'll see her uncle and grandparents, and it's just so sad. I don't even know what to tell her. I think she's the only person this affects me through because everyone else has been very mature about this. None of my friends have asked me anything about it, and they're respecting my space. It's also been difficult for me to deal with this because I used to talk to Joe every weekend and spend time with my parents often, but now all of that is gone. They haven't even bothered to speak to me. It was my daughter's birthday 2 days ago, and they didn't even wish her a happy birthday. I know I'm the one who chose to cut ties with them, but the least they could have done was wish my daughter a happy birthday. She's a child, and not to blame for what the adults are doing. She was very confused as to why it was her birthday, and no one from her family had shown interest in her party since it was only a couple of her friends and a few of my coworkers and friends with their kids, but not her uncle, who was always the life of all her birthday parties up until now. I probably shouldn't worry about these things, but they do matter, and I felt really bad. But it's okay. I guess I'll get over this in time. At least this incident with my family revealed everyone's true colors, and now I know exactly where I stand with them. Update 3. Well, I have some juicy updates, though not so juicy for my brother's finances. Turns out my friend, the one who got him the job, was at my daughter's birthday party because he has a child of a similar age and brought him to share the fun. What kid doesn't love a birthday party? But aside from the fact that both had a great time, as did the other kids who attended, the interesting part was the conversation we had. He told me about my brother, and although the talk started quite casually, he eventually confessed that my brother hadn't been the best fit for the position. As I mentioned before, he wasn't qualified, and my friend only helped him out as a favor to me. He didn't know anything about my issues with my family. He was just telling me because he was thinking about firing my brother and hiring someone else. Although he wanted to discuss it with me first to soften the blow, since this was a favor to me and he felt bad, I didn't hesitate to reassure him that it was okay. I told him a bit about everything that had happened, which made his decision much easier. Maybe I was a little harsh here, but honestly, He was already planning to let him go, and I just didn't see the point in helping my brother anymore. If he can forget everything I've done for him, perhaps he should learn to get by on his own, which he'll have to do now. What's the worst that could happen? That he won't talk to me anymore. That's already the case, isn't it? I don't think it can get worse than making a little girl suffer just because my brother and his wife are so petty. Update 4. Well, yesterday, I had a conversation with my brother, and it wasn't pretty. He came to my house to accuse me, just as many in the comments had suggested might happen. The only thing is, before he could say anything, I called him out for not coming to my daughter's party. He didn't have much to say about that, only that since I'd been mean to Emma, he didn't think it was right to come to his niece's birthday party. Without a doubt, that solidifies his place as the worst uncle ever, especially because after brushing that off as a small matter, he moved on to his real problem. I think that sums him up as a narcissist. He was upset because he lost his job, and things weren't going well at home. Not that they were thinking of divorcing or anything, but losing his job hadn't been good at all. Of course, he blamed me, saying I did it out of spite. But I basically explained that my friend had been planning to fire him anyway. I just didn't try to talk him out of it because I didn't see the point. He kept raising his voice, not to the point of yelling, but it was already a bit too loud for my liking. At one point, I told him to shut up and listen to me. I explained that I no longer had to do anything for him because he'd already decided who mattered most, so now it was time for him to find a job on his own and never come back. I also told him that it didn't matter if he apologized tomorrow or whatever, because our relationship was far beyond the point of no return. After that, I asked him to leave the house, and he reluctantly agreed. Many of you have asked about my relationship with my parents, and that's in the same place. I've already blocked and removed them from everywhere because I don't think what they did can be justified. I hope that when they need care in the future, their golden child will be able to provide for them, because neither my daughter nor I will be there to help them.